It started with a kiss. I had just gotten back from a weekend trip with my brother. 2 days off the grid, no emails, no deadlines. When I walked through the door, Kristen greeted me like always. But the kiss she gave me was different. Too soft. Too timed. Like something done out of habit rather than feeling. 12 years of marriage teaches you a lot, including how to spot small changes, the shifts in tone, the weight in a pause. I didn't ask her about it. Not then. But something stayed with me. A stillness behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. The next morning, Kristen was in the shower. I walked into the kitchen to start coffee. Her phone was on the counter, screen glowing with a notification. Marshall Jones. Her boss. A name I'd heard dozens of times over the years. She'd joked often about how overbearing he was. Micromanager with a caffeine addiction, she once said. Texting me at midnight like I owe him my soul. But this message was time-stamped 1:13 a.m. It read, "Last night was." That was all I saw. Just those 3 words before the screen faded to black. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. I stared at it for a moment, then poured my coffee and sat down at the table like nothing had happened. But that phrase repeated in my mind like a chorus with no melody. When Kristen walked in a few minutes later, towel drying her hair, she gave me a kiss on the cheek and smiled like everything was fine. "Sleep okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "You?" Knocked out the moment I hit the bed. I nodded. Said nothing else. But something had cracked open, even if just slightly. I began to see things differently. That week, she stayed late at the office 3 times. Said it was for a campaign launch. It made sense. Her firm always got busy toward the end of the year, but something felt off. Her tone had changed. She was quicker to end conversations, slower to respond to texts. I suggested dinner on Thursday. "Let's go out. Just us." She paused. "Too long. This week's packed. Maybe next?" "Sure," I said, masking the hollowness I felt creeping in. Friday came. I finished work early and thought I'd surprise her with dinner from her favorite Thai place. I got home, set the table, lit a candle. Texted her, "Your favorite's waiting. Come hungry," smiley face. No reply. By 9 p.m., I heard the front door open. I turned from the kitchen, smiling. She stepped in and froze. It was barely perceptible, but I caught it. "You're home," she said, setting her purse down. "Early. Wanted to surprise you. You didn't see my text?" She blinked. "Oh, I left my phone in the car." We sat and ate. She picked at her food, smiled too much, laughed at things that weren't funny. And I watched her, not with suspicion, not yet, but with a growing awareness that something was slipping through my fingers. She was right there across from me, but she felt miles away. And for the first time in our marriage, I wondered if she was hiding something. The next morning, the silence between us felt heavier than usual. Kristen moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, pouring cereal, checking her phone, sipping coffee, while I sat at the table pretending to read the news on my tablet. Every so often, I glanced at her, watching for anything unusual. A pause. A look. Something that might answer the question I hadn't dared to ask yet. She caught me watching once. Smiled quickly. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded back, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. By the end of the week, I had stopped pretending. I was watching her closely now, but I wasn't confrontational. I never raised my voice, never made accusations. I just observed. The messages from Marshall kept coming. I noticed the pattern. Her phone would light up late at night, long after she said goodnight. Sometimes she'd excuse herself to the bathroom and come back 15 minutes later. One evening, when she left her phone in the living room, I saw the screen light up 4 times in 5 minutes. All from him. But I never opened them. I never scrolled. I never broke that final boundary. I wanted her to tell me. I wanted the truth to come from her lips, not from a screen. On Sunday morning, we went out for breakfast, something we hadn't done in weeks. She was cheerful, even affectionate. She held my hand across the table like she used to. For a moment, I started to question myself. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was being paranoid. Then, as we were leaving the restaurant, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then quickly slid it back into her purse. I didn't say anything, but something in her eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe, or panic. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it, and I knew I wasn't imagining anything. That night, I sat in my study pretending to work. Kristen was in the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. I heard her talking softly, barely audible. A phone call. Her voice had that hushed, intimate cadence. Not the way she talked to her colleagues or friends. It was the tone you use when you don't want to be overheard. I didn't move. I didn't interrupt. I just sat there, staring at the computer screen, letting the weight of it all settle in. She was talking to him. Not about work. Not about campaigns or deadlines. About something personal. Something private. The next day, I decided to test something. I told Kristen I was flying to Chicago for a site visit. In truth, I'd taken a few days off. No trip. No meetings. I just wanted to see what she'd do when she thought I was gone. Her reaction was odd. Not sad. Not disappointed. She nodded, almost too quickly. Okay, I'll miss you. I left early that morning, drove to the airport, then circled back around and checked into a small hotel 20 minutes from our house. I spent the day walking through the city, clearing my head. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just strangely calm. Detached. Like I was preparing myself for something I couldn't stop. That evening, around 7 p.m., I parked down the street from our house. Lights were on. Her car was in the driveway. I waited. Watched. At 7:38 p.m., another car pulled up. A silver Audi. New. Clean. Tinted windows. I recognized it. It was Marshall's. He didn't get out right away. I saw his silhouette sitting there for a minute or two, as if waiting for a signal. Then Kristen stepped out onto the porch. She didn't wave, didn't call out. But she stood there, hands folded, like she was expecting him. He walked up the steps. She didn't invite him in. Not right away. They stood close, speaking in low voices. Her head tilted up to him. His hand brushed her arm. Then, finally, she opened the door. He followed her inside. The door closed. I sat there in my car, the engine off, the air growing cold around me. My fingers were clenched around the steering wheel, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just watched the house, the dark windows, the silent betrayal taking place behind them. It wasn't about what they were doing. It was about what it meant. I didn't go home that night. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the house, lights glowing softly behind the curtains. Kristen's silhouette moved briefly past the front window, followed by his. Then the curtains closed. That was all I needed. I drove back to the hotel, checked in for another night, and lay on the bed with my arms folded across my chest, staring at the ceiling like it held some kind of answer. But none came. I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to. My mind wasn't racing, it was quiet. Too quiet. Like the eye of a storm just before it shifts again. The next morning, I got dressed, checked out, and returned home as if nothing had happened. When I opened the front door, the house was clean. Peaceful. Kristen was in the kitchen, making eggs, the scent of coffee wafting through the air like any other Monday. She looked up and smiled. You're back early. I nodded, setting my bag down. Flight was canceled. She blinked, only for a second. Oh, that's okay. I'm glad. She didn't ask questions. Didn't probe. That told me everything. She had prepared herself for the lie. She had rehearsed the response. In her mind, I was never supposed to walk back through that door until Tuesday. I sat at the table while she placed a plate in front of me. Eggs, toast, avocado, like she always made it. We ate in silence, and I watched her. Not with anger. With detachment. Like someone cataloging details for an autopsy. The soft curl of her hair. The way her fingers tapped lightly against the table. She looked exactly like the woman I married, but now I knew there was something behind her eyes. A version of her I hadn't known existed. I'm thinking of taking a few days off, she said suddenly, wiping her mouth. Maybe go to the spa. Reset a bit. I nodded. You deserve it. She smiled, looking pleased with my response. But I noticed the glance she gave her phone when it buzzed. Not even a full look, just a flick of her eyes. Then back to me. We didn't talk much the rest of the day. I worked from the study. She cleaned the guest room. I heard her vacuuming, humming softly to herself. She was trying to act normal. Or maybe she believed she could. That night, we watched a movie on the couch. I let her choose. She curled up next to me, her head on my shoulder, like nothing was wrong. I played my part. I didn't flinch when she touched me. Didn't recoil when she kissed me goodnight. But when I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling once again, I realized something deeply unsettling. I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. I had always believed that if something like this happened, if Kristen ever betrayed me, it would shatter me. I'd break down, scream, rage against the sky. But I didn't. I lay there, listening to her breath, steady and soft, and felt an emptiness so complete it was almost peaceful. The next few days passed in a blur of routines. Morning coffee, work, brief conversations. Her phone always nearby. Her excuses always polished. I stopped trying to find out more. I already knew. The moment I saw Marshall step through our front door, any doubt I had was gone. What remained now wasn't curiosity. It was choice. What was I going to do? That question lingered in the background of everything I did. At work, at home, in the shower, while driving. It whispered to me like a second voice in my head. You know. So now what? I didn't speak to anyone about it. Not my brother. Not my friends. I wasn't ready for the questions. I wasn't ready to say the words out loud. My wife is cheating on me. Even now, it sounded strange in my mind. Like it belonged to someone else's life. Not mine. I began to plan. Quietly. Carefully. I started gathering documents, bank statements, insurance policies, account access. I made copies. I transferred some assets. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed control. If this was going to end, it would end on my terms. I didn't change anything on the surface. To Kristen, I was still the same husband she'd always known. Quiet, consistent, unbothered. I smiled when she walked into the room. I kissed her cheek in the mornings. I asked how her day was when she came home late. But behind the mask, I was sorting the truth into boxes. One marked proof. One marked preparation. And one marked exit. At night, I lay in bed next to her, listening to her breathing, wondering if she ever looked over at me and felt the weight of what she was doing. I doubted it. People rarely think of the damage they cause while they're still enjoying the illusion. Kristen still cooked dinner most nights. She still kissed me goodbye before work. But the warmth had vanished. The tenderness that had once defined us had been replaced with performance. Every smile, every touch, every word. It all had the faint scent of acting. And I'd stopped trying to believe it was real. One afternoon, I took a long walk through the neighborhood after work. I let my phone die. No distractions. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts. Was I angry? Not really. I felt insulted, yes. Disrespected, betrayed. But not angry. Not in the fire and fury way I once imagined I'd be if something like this ever happened. The truth is, I had always believed Kristen and I had something different. Not perfect, but solid. Built on trust and mutual respect. But now I knew that even the most stable homes can have termites beneath the walls. The next day, while Kristen was out shopping, I went into her office. I'd never done that before. It always felt like her space, a private little corner of the house. But now, it felt different. It was no longer the room of my wife. It was the workspace of a stranger. I didn't dig through drawers or open her laptop. I wasn't hunting for evidence. I already had that. Instead, I sat in her chair and looked at the small, framed photos on her desk. One was of us, taken on a beach 5 years ago. I was holding her from behind, and we were both laughing at something out of frame. It was a good memory, but it didn't hurt to look at it. That's how I knew I was already letting her go. I took the photo and turned it face down. That weekend, Kristen told me she'd be spending Saturday at the office. Quarterly presentation, she said. Big deal for the partners. I nodded. Need a ride? No, she said quickly. Marshall's picking me up. I looked up from my book. He is? She hesitated. Yeah, just easier that way. We'll be going over some things on the way. I gave a slight nod. Sure. Makes sense. She smiled, a little too wide. Thanks for understanding. I didn't say anything more. That night, I sat in the living room alone. No TV, no music, just silence and shadows. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard her key in the door. She walked in, humming softly, her heels clicking against the hardwood. When she saw me sitting in the dark, she flinched slightly. You scared me, she said with a nervous laugh. Why are you sitting here in the dark? Just thinking, I replied. She walked past me into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, then lingered by the sink. Presentation went well. I asked. Yeah, really well, she said, not looking at me. Good, I said softly. I'm glad. She nodded, then walked past me again, heading upstairs. I heard her pause halfway, then say, Are you coming up? In a bit, I said. I listened to her footsteps fade into the bedroom. I sat there for another hour. Then I opened my laptop and began writing an email. It was to myself, a journal of sorts. A dated account. A record of everything I had seen, heard, and suspected. Not to use against her. Not yet. But to remind myself later that I hadn't imagined this. That there had been signs. that I had known. I titled it, The Day It Started to Unravel. By now, Kristen had become an expert at navigating double lives. She balanced her days like a performer. Phone always within reach, her tone always calibrated, every detail planned to the minute. If she sensed I suspected anything, she never showed it. And I never gave her a reason to. But something changed after that Saturday. She grew more relaxed around me. Not affectionate, just careless. A little too comfortable, as if convinced I was still in the dark. She stopped checking over her shoulder when reading messages. She even left her laptop open in the living room once, walking away mid-email. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. It was strange, the way deceit reshapes everything. The smell of her perfume, once comforting, now made me sick to my stomach. The sound of her laugh, which used to lift my spirit, now landed like a slap. Still, I said nothing. I smiled when she walked in. I nodded when she explained late nights. But inside, I was making room for the inevitable collapse. One Thursday evening, we were invited to a dinner party. Old friends. Kristen was glowing. Perfect dress, perfect makeup, perfect lies. At the table, she sat beside me, laughing easily, telling stories from our early years like nothing had changed. It was surreal. During dessert, a friend leaned toward me and said, "You two are rock solid. You can see it. The way she looks at you, it's rare." I smiled politely. Yeah, we've been through a lot. Kristen reached for my hand under the table then, as if on cue. I let her take it. Her fingers curled around mine like she still believed they belonged there. But all I could think about was Marshall's hand doing the same thing. Later that night, back home, she leaned against the bathroom counter brushing her teeth, humming some pop song, completely at ease. When she turned off the light and slid into bed beside me, she whispered, "I love you." It was the first time she'd said those words in weeks. I said nothing. The silence didn't seem to bother her. She rolled over, and soon her breathing slowed into sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and realized something important. She wasn't afraid of being caught anymore. She believed I was either too blind or too weak to act. That was her mistake. The next morning, I sat in the garage alone. The air was cold. I kept the door closed and the light off, just me and the stillness. That's when I made the decision. Not an impulsive one. Not driven by anger. It was quiet. I realized I no longer wanted to fight for her. I didn't want to beg or expose her or ask questions I already knew the answers to. What I wanted was distance, peace, clarity. She had already made her choice. What remained was how I would respond. I began calling lawyers that day, just to get information. No commitments. No filings. Just groundwork. Quiet steps. In the evenings, I organized papers, scanned copies, moved money. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Just careful separation. It became a rhythm. She was planning her next lie. I was preparing for the last one. Then, one night, she left her phone charging in the kitchen and forgot to silence it. At 11:14 p.m., a message lit up the screen. "Marshall, still thinking about Sunday. That dress." I didn't read more. I didn't need to. The screen dimmed. And in the reflection of the dark glass, I saw my own face. Calm, quiet, unreadable. I turned away, went upstairs, and slid into bed beside her. She stirred slightly, then nestled closer, draping her arm over my chest like she had a right to be there. I closed my eyes. This time, I didn't feel empty. I felt ready. I didn't wake up angry anymore. That was the clearest sign. The weight that once tightened my chest each morning had been replaced by something else, resolve. Cold, steady, and quiet. Like a rope being pulled tight, ready to snap. Kristen was still playing her part. Breakfast, work, texts, smiles. But her timing was off now. The rhythm she once mastered had slipped. She spoke faster, moved more carefully, as if some part of her sensed the shift beneath the surface. Maybe she didn't know what had changed, only that something had. She started asking me more questions, innocent ones, on the surface. "How was your day? You seemed quiet last night. Is everything okay?" I gave her the same answer every time. Just tired. In truth, I had never been more awake. By the second week of March, I had met with 2 attorneys. Both were competent, professional. I chose the second. Her tone was less sympathetic and more focused, which suited me. I didn't want comfort. I wanted control. We discussed my options, drew up timelines, and began preparing. "Do you have evidence?" she asked. I nodded. "Enough." She didn't ask to see it. She trusted that I'd produce it if needed. I appreciated that. She wasn't concerned about the drama, only the outcome. I wasn't planning to file immediately. Timing mattered, and I still needed to do one thing before I made it final. I needed her to tell me the truth. Not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, just to hear her say it. One evening, I suggested we take a drive. She looked surprised but agreed. We used to drive aimlessly for hours back when we were dating. Long conversations over winding roads, shared songs on the stereo, windows down in summer air. This time, it was winter. The roads were quiet. The heat inside the car hummed steadily. I didn't play music. I wanted the silence. We drove for 20 minutes before I spoke. Do you remember the cabin in Vermont? She looked over, puzzled. Of course. That was our second anniversary. You said it was your favorite weekend. It was, she said. Why bring that up? I kept my eyes on the road, just thinking about what we used to be. She reached for my hand, brushing her fingers lightly over mine. We're still us, she said, too quickly. I didn't respond. A minute later, I pulled the car into an empty overlook. Snow dusted the railing, and the valley below stretched out in silence. Kristen looked out the window. Beautiful. Yeah, I said, then turned to face her. Kristen, I need to ask you something. Her shoulders stiffened. Okay. I paused, watching her closely. Are you having an affair? Her breath caught. Just a second. But enough. She didn't look away. She didn't cry. She didn't deny it. Not right away. Instead, she said the worst possible thing. Why are you asking me that? Not no. Not how could you think that? Just deflection. I leaned back slightly. You didn't answer me. She exhaled, long and slow. Her hand left mine. Martin. That was all she said. The silence stretched. I saw him, I said. At our house. 2 weeks ago. Her eyes widened, lips parting, but still, no denial. I watched him walk through the front door. I continued. And you let him in. She covered her mouth, as if that would erase what had happened. Finally, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen. I looked away, out toward the dark horizon. When? I asked. She hesitated. A few months ago. Why? I don't know, she said, voice trembling. I felt lost. You were always busy. He listened. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I nodded slowly. The usual script. He's married too, isn't he? Yes. So it's just two people escaping responsibility together. She didn't respond. I turned back to her. Was it just once? She didn't answer. That was all I needed. I turned the key, started the car, and drove back in silence. She didn't try to explain again, and I didn't ask more. There was nothing else I wanted to hear. The next morning, she acted like the drive hadn't happened. Kristen brewed coffee, sliced fruit, and set the table for two. She didn't say anything unusual, just asked if I wanted toast. Her eyes avoided mine, and I let her have that. Let her pretend the confession she'd given under the stars had vanished with the night. I didn't challenge her silence. I had what I needed. The rest was noise. When I left for work, I texted my lawyer. We're ready. File it. The papers were prepared already. No fault, irreconcilable differences. There were clauses about assets, insurance, and the house. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't ask for revenge. I just wanted it over, and I made sure the terms reflected that. By noon, Kristen was served. She called me an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. That evening, I walked in through the front door as usual. Her coat was still on, as if she'd just gotten home. She stood near the kitchen counter holding the papers with both hands, her knuckles pale against the edges. You filed for divorce, she said flatly. I did. She set the papers down. Just like that. No, not just like that, I said. It took months. She stared at me, eyes glistening, but I saw no remorse, just disbelief. The same disbelief cheaters feel when their victim doesn't beg or rage, but simply walks away. I thought maybe we could talk, she said. I nodded slowly. Talk now, or talk 6 months ago? Martin. I held up a hand. Don't say my name like that. You had your moment under the stars. That was your truth. You chose it. Now I'm choosing mine. Her shoulders sagged. It didn't mean anything, what happened with him. I was lonely. Then you should have said so. You should have come to me. Not him. I didn't think you'd understand. Try me, I said. Try me now? Tell me what part of your betrayal I don't understand. She said nothing. You could have left before you crossed the line. You could have said, this isn't working. I'd have respected that. Hell, I might have even tried to save it. But you didn't. It wasn't planned. but it was repeated. I cut in. You don't fall into someone's bed more than once without intention. Kristen sat down at the table, staring at the divorce packet as if it might change if she looked long enough. I love you, she said quietly. No, I said. You love being loved. There's a difference. She didn't argue. I'm not here to punish you, I added after a moment. I'm not looking to humiliate you. I just want space to heal. You can have your freedom. You already took it anyway. Her voice cracked. Do you really think I'm a terrible person? I looked at her for a long time. No, I said finally. I think you're a coward. It landed harder than anything else I could have said. She flinched like I'd struck her. I stood up. You can stay here a few more days. Then you'll need to move out. And where will you go? This is still my house. I'll stay here. She opened her mouth to argue, but then thought better of it. I'll call my sister, she said softly. Good. We stood in the same kitchen where we once made plans for the future, made dinners, made each other laugh. But now, the space felt too quiet, as if even the walls knew it was over. That night, she slept in the guest room. I lay in the master bedroom alone for the first time in years, staring at the ceiling again. But this time, I felt something different. Relief. Not because I'd ended it, but because I'd finally stopped pretending that I was still married to the same woman. Kristen left on a Thursday. Her sister pulled into the driveway mid-afternoon, and I watched from the upstairs window as they loaded 2 suitcases and a few boxes into the trunk of her car. Kristen didn't ask for help. She didn't linger. She moved with the mechanical resolve of someone who knew she had run out of justifications. Before she left, she stood in the entryway, holding her coat. I was in the living room, arms folded, back straight. I know there's nothing I can say, she said. I didn't respond. But I need you to know something, she continued. It wasn't just about him. I raised an eyebrow. No. She looked down at her shoes, then back up. It was about us. About what I let us become. I nodded once. That part one believe. She stepped closer. Do you remember the first time we met? I almost smiled. You spilled coffee on my shirt. Her lips lifted slightly. And you still asked for my number. I didn't reply. The moment hung between us, nostalgic and broken. I think I kept chasing that version of you, she said. And when I couldn't find him anymore, I looked somewhere else. I met her eyes. I never disappeared, Kristen. You just stopped looking in the right place. She swallowed hard, but didn't deny it. I don't hate you, I said. Her eyes widened, surprised. You don't? No, I repeated. You were part of the best years of my life. That doesn't get erased overnight. She exhaled, something between relief and regret. But, I added, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean staying. She nodded slowly, tears forming. I'm not asking you to stay, she said. I just wanted to be honest, finally. It was the most honest thing she had said in months. She stepped forward, and for a brief moment, I thought she might reach for me. But instead, she laid her house key on the table. Then she walked out. And just like that, the house was quiet again. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no sense of victory. Only space, an unfamiliar freedom that felt both empty and necessary. That night, I poured a glass of scotch and stepped out onto the back deck. The air was cool, the sky clear. I sat alone, staring up at the stars. No music, no phone, just silence. After a long while, I whispered the words I hadn't allowed myself to say aloud. I forgive you. Not for her. For me. Holding on to anger would have been easy. Justified. But I didn't want to carry it into whatever came next. I needed that weight off my shoulders. And in that moment, under a quiet sky, I finally let it go. The first few weeks after Kristen left were the strangest. The house felt too large, too orderly. I never realized how much of her filled the space, how her movements left traces of life in every room. Now, each surface remained untouched, the silence uninterrupted. I adjusted in small ways. I moved back into the guest room. It was smaller, simpler. The bed didn't creak the same way. I changed the sheets, replaced the curtains, removed the framed photos on the wall. Not in anger, just to stop being surrounded by ghosts. I cleaned more than usual, cooked for myself, started jogging again. Routine became my rope. People began to ask questions, some with curiosity, others with concern. At work, I kept it vague. We're taking time apart. No drama, no details. That was intentional. I didn't want pity. I didn't want admiration. I wanted peace. Kristen didn't call after she left. Not at first. She didn't ask about the divorce. She didn't try to fight the terms. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to salvage. But one afternoon, a message appeared on my phone. "Kristen, would it be okay if we talked? Just once." I stared at it for a long time. I waited a full day before replying. "Me, one coffee. Neutral place. Just talk." We met at a small cafe downtown. I got there first. She walked in wearing a soft blue sweater I remembered from years ago, the kind she always wore on rainy Sundays when we curled up on the couch together. For a second, it almost fooled me. We sat across from each other. Neither of us reached for the other. She looked thinner, tired. There were small lines beneath her eyes that hadn't been there before. But she smiled, a quiet, real smile. "I didn't think you'd say yes," she said. "I didn't think I would either." She stirred her coffee, not drinking it. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly, for not destroying me. You had every right to. I wouldn't have blamed you." I shook my head. "That's not who I am." She nodded slowly. "I know. That's what makes this harder." We talked for nearly an hour. Not about Marshall. Not about betrayal. About us. The early years. The in-between moments. How we both stopped speaking honestly long before anything actually fell apart. It wasn't reconciliation. It was closure. When we stood to leave, she looked at me for a long time. "I'm not asking you to come back," she said. "But I want you to know. I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for not telling you when I stopped being happy." I took a breath. "You should have told me. I might have failed to fix it, but at least I would have had the chance to try." She nodded. "I know." Outside the cafe, we stood in silence. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to me. "What's this?" "A letter," she said. "Something I wrote a week after you found out. I didn't know how to give it to you." I slipped it into my jacket pocket. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. She turned and walked away, fading into the crowd like any stranger. That night, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. No begging. No justifications. Just honesty, raw, clumsy, vulnerable. A timeline of where she thought we drifted. And a line that stayed with me. "You didn't lose me, Martin. I lost myself first. And then, I lost you." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer. Not to keep her, just to remember. Spring came quietly. The trees in the neighborhood bloomed earlier than usual. I started keeping the windows open. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt mine. It echoed differently now, not with absence, but with possibility. Kristen and I finalized the divorce in April. No lawyers needed to argue. She signed everything as agreed. There were no surprises, no battles. Just paperwork. Quiet acknowledgments of what had already ended long before we admitted it. On the day it became official, she sent a single text. "I wish things had been different. Thank you for your grace." I didn't reply. Not out of bitterness. Just because there was nothing left to say. I didn't rush to start over. No dating apps. No rebound. I spent my evenings walking, reading, cooking meals I hadn't made in years. I rediscovered the sound of my own voice in a quiet room. The rhythm of my thoughts, uninterrupted. I started journaling. Not about Kristen. About me. Somewhere in the mess of her betrayal, I had realized how much of myself I'd lost. Not because of her, but because I stopped paying attention. I had fallen into the marriage like a routine, thinking commitment alone was enough to sustain love. But I had neglected pieces of myself, slowly, year by year. Now, I was rebuilding those parts. A few months later, I ran into her by accident. It was a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. She looked surprised, nervous even. I smiled and gave a polite nod. We exchanged only a few words. "How have you been?" she asked. "Good. You?" "Getting there," she said. And I believed her. She asked if I had read the letter. I said I had. She didn't press for details. "I meant every word," she added. "I know. We didn't make plans to talk again. We just parted with a quiet understanding." That night, for the first time in months, I took out the photo frame from our Vermont trip. I didn't cry. I didn't feel bitter. I simply looked at it like a relic from a life that once existed. Important, meaningful, but no longer present. Then I placed it back in the drawer. Not because I wanted to forget, but because it was time to live forward, not backward. I forgave Kristen fully, not as an act of mercy for her, but as a release for myself. Carrying her betrayal any further would have been like dragging a dead branch through spring. I didn't need vengeance. I didn't need to be right. I needed peace. And now, I finally had it.